What's going on, my fellow A-Plusers? Welcome back once again to a brand new episode of A-Plus Hero Report. We've got a brand new video for you guys. I'm your host, as always, Adam Perez, coming through once again with a brand new Mandalorian review. We're going to get into Season 2, Episode number 3, or Chapter 10, titled The Harris. This was another fantastic episode this week, if you ask me, man. I felt like the cameos alone were enough just to get me excited as somebody who loves Star Wars, and just seeing some of these really familiar faces getting the opportunity to shine on this particular stage, man. It was actually a really fantastic time and fun time to go ahead and see this episode and some of all the actors that wind up populating it, guys. So listen, 3 episodes into Season 2 already. I'm just counting down. Listen, I'm not even counting down to the finale, but I still just never want this series to end, honestly. Like, there are times, there's not very many times that I want a season to be like 20 plus episodes long. But when it comes to The Mandalorian, that certainly is the case. But this was another great episode here this week, one that I certainly enjoyed. The cameos alone impressed me. I mean, can we just run down the list, mind you? Sasha Banks from WWE, also known as Mercedes Varnado, I believe is her real name, showcased up in here. We also had Titus Williver, if I'm not mistaken, is his last name, who was actually the captain on the Imperial freighter. It was really great to see his face. I didn't even expect him to be in this season, but him popping up was fantastic, to say the least. One of Bo-Katan's side Mandalorians was also Simon Cassianadin. Let me see if I can pronounce his name correctly. Simon Cassianitis is his name. I don't recall where I've seen this guy before, but I've seen his face a couple of times on television, but he definitely looked familiar to me. And of course, the head honcho herself in here, Katee Sackhoff. I want to say debuting as live action, at least, Bo-Katan. But for those of you who have followed the Clone Wars series, I believe Katee Sackhoff also voiced Bo-Katan in the animated Star Wars Clone Wars series also. So it's really all coming full circle for Katee Sackhoff, to be quite honest with you. And I thought she did a stellar job. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Katee Sackhoff since her Battlestar Galactica days as Starbuck. A fantastic series, by the way. If you have yet to see Battlestar Galactica and you're a big fan of sci-fi, do yourself a favor and please check out that series. But Katee Sackhoff has always impressed me, from that to her recurring appearances in The Flash and to other things that she's certainly been working on. This was a perfect fit for her. To see her in the Mandalorian armor as Bo-Katan, the hairstyle, the headband, not only does she sound perfect for the role, but she looks perfect for the role. And I'm so glad that they were able to get her in this series, to be honest with you, because she definitely elevated this material, definitely elevated her role. And it's definitely something that I want to see her return to. Considering just all the nuances of like all the connections that we've seen her make. Clearly, she has a really defined past with Moff Gideon. We see her that even though that they are trying to steal this Imperial freighter in this week's episode, there is a bigger goal in mind for Bo-Katan, and that is, in fact, to get back her Darksaber. And she knows exactly who has that Darksaber. And the fact that she's hunting down that man, aka Moff Gideon, who has the Darksaber, you can clearly tell that there's certainly some history between those two characters. And we also get to see Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon here in this episode, also briefly as a hologram, but he definitely pops up in here also. But I got to tell you, when it comes to the history of the Mandalorians, when it comes to what Katee Sackhoff and Moff Gideon have probably been up to, I'm still very much leaning on the fact that Moff Gideon is probably maybe a former Mandalorian himself. If not, definitely somebody in the Empire that came to Mandalorian either after the Purge or whatever the case may be, and wind up managing to get their hands on it. So Moff Gideon's history is one that I'm really fascinated with, and just to continue to see what his connection is to Bo-Katan in the future. Count me in, man. Count me in. And of course, the opportunity to see Moff Gideon in this episode working alongside with Titus Welliver, who was the captain for the Freightliner here. I love just the gravitas that Moff Gideon gives, even with him not even being in the room, right? I mean, the idea that he gives the direction and the signal to go ahead and just crash the freighter, right? Like, hey, man, the Mandalorians have taken over practically your entire ship with the exception of the bridge. I was kind of thinking to myself while I was watching it, like, hey, if you really don't want this stuff to get into the hands of the Mandalorians, just crash the ship, man, crash the ship. So the fact that that same message comes from Moff Gideon himself, but he gives that message, but it's definitely much more I want to say sinister way of giving that message. Like his intentions truly is to, instead of just like setting the ship into the ocean and maybe escaping, no, he wants every man to go down with this ship. He winds up having the captain kill his two, flyers, his two pilots there, and then him going to go ahead and crash the ship himself. Intense stuff, man. But again, that definitely goes to show the power that is Moff Gideon that he certainly has. So Giancarlo Esposito continues to wow me, even as a hologram in this series. But a couple things. We also had Bryce Dallas Howard returning as the director. This is her second time directing for The Mandalorian. She did have one episode last time, which was The Small Village, if I'm not mistaken, where Mando, aka Din Djarin, wind up meeting, I believe, one of the villager ladies who was trying to convince him to either, settle down, have a life, take off his helmet, sort of thing. Get comfortable, Mando, get comfortable. So that's the episode that Bryce Dallas Howard actually did last season, which I'm sure some people may not have been the biggest fans of that episode. I certainly didn't mind it, but I got to tell you, man, for Bryce's second go through for the Star Wars universe, I think she nailed it, honestly. From the pacing, the action certainly picked up for sure for her. And I thought she really utilized a lot of these actors really well, especially Sasha Banks, somebody who's not noticeably known for her acting or her performances, if you will, in front of the camera. I mean, granted, she is a WWE wrestler, right? So there definitely has to be some level of entertainment and performing involved. So it's not like she's completely oblivious on how to act. But sometimes when you don't have somebody that's used to being in a television series or a movie, it's really great to be able to have a director that can really direct you and put you in really great positions to show your strengths. And I really do think that Bryce Dallas Howard did that with Sasha Banks here this week, or Mercedes Vernando, however you want to call her, whatever the case may be. But I thought she did a pretty good job. We didn't see too much of her in here, but the little times that we did see, I didn't have a problem with her at all. So I thought Bryce really did do a fantastic job. And I also love how she really highlighted just the power of a pack of Mandos and what they could really do when they all work together, right? I mean, the fact that one of the Imperial officers on the bridge of the freighter talked about, I think there's like 10 men. I think there's like an army of 10 in here. And they come to find out that it's literally just 4 Mandalorians. I think Bryce just did a fantastic job of showcasing just how badass these Mandalorians are and really how smooth they just work together. And really just a handful of them can truly take down an entire ship on their own. It was some really impressive stuff, to be quite honest with you. So I really love the direction that we wind up getting in here. And I thought the cameos were super strong in regards to giving us some amazing performances. One of the things, couple of things I do want to talk about real quick, honorable mention does go out to Frog Lady, who meets up with her Frog Man in this episode. We get to see that continued journey of theirs as they wind up heading to the planet. I believe it's the planet Trask, or it's at least the city of Trask on whatever planet that they certainly are at. But they wind up crash landing, which I thought was a great intro. Just seeing the Razor Crest about to do a crash landing onto this world, thinking that they wind up landing successfully only to fall into the ocean and have to be dragged out by this really cool looking sort of modified AT-AT, if you will, with like this workers crane on it and stuff. I'm assuming they use it to take things out of the harbor or the bay or whatever the case may be. But Mando's ship certainly is saved. And unfortunately for Mando, he does have to give up I think he says 10 credits or something like that to get his ship fixed. So not fully fixed, but at least capable of getting off world if he certainly needs to. But it was really cool to finally see Frog Lady and Frog Man certainly meet up together. Really wholesome moment, considering the fact that that their species is really on the verge of extinction. This is the only sort of backwater planet, if you will, that they can raise their kids and their species and stuff before they go extinct. So just to have that heartfelt moment of her actually making it to her to her destination, meeting up with her man. Most of her her eggs intact. That was still a little bit heartbreaking, honestly, especially when you see one of the babies actually born in this episode. I'm just thinking to myself, if only she had 3 more babies, man. If only. It's so crazy because, you know, when we did our review last week, I told you how kind of disturbing it was, like, for me to watch Baby Yoda just knocking back these eggs. Like, you're literally eating babies, Yoda. And so the fact that it kind of startled me, it was fascinating when I went online over to Twitter and got to see, like, how, I don't want to say an outrage, but like how loud some of the fans were for those particular scenes that also were disturbed as much as I certainly were. So I'm glad that that chapter of Baby Yoda's life is over, at least, and Frog Lady and Frog Man can certainly go ahead and raise their kids exactly the way that they certainly want to. So I thought that was great. But of course, we see Mando falling into yet another trap. This guy's got to stop trusting half these people that he winds up meeting with. But he thinks that somebody's going to go ahead and take him to meet the Mandalorians, only to go ahead and trap him, suck Baby Yoda down inside the underwater, inside this like brand new, this creature or something like that they wind up capturing in their ship, throwing Mando in there also before we get to see Bo-Katan and her crew come and rescue Mandalorian. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that we continue to discover more about Mandalorian, coming to find out that he's actually a child of the Watch. And I wasn't too familiar with what this was actually, but Bo-Katan goes on to let us know that the Watch is really a cult of religious zealots that apparently separated from the Mandalorians, really kind of set on reestablishing sort of the ancient ways. Now, apparently the ancient ways of the Mandalorian, not everybody when it comes to on Mandalorian practice those ways. I think for the most part, more mainstream, maybe Mandalorians didn't necessarily pay it that much attention. So there definitely was more of a religious zealot aspect of the Mandalorian race that certainly stuck very true to the ways of the Mandalorian, if you will. The reason why they say this is the way, that's exactly where it certainly comes from. So while they certainly everybody certainly believes in this is the way, there are clearly some aspects of the Mandalorian race that are a little bit more on the religious zealot side. And so when we get the opportunity to see Mandalorian watching Bo-Katan and her crew taking off their helmet, that's a super big no-no for him. But I like the idea of this coming up in this episode because I think this really shines a little bit more light on the Mandalorian himself to let him know that, while you are Mandos and they are also, well, technically he's not a Mandalorian, but considering the fact that they are Mandos, I do find it fascinating that they do have two very sort of different beliefs. You know what I mean? And so, like, even what is Sasha Banks's character in here? Costco, it's Kosko, Costco something. I can't remember her last name, unfortunately. But even she has like something negative to say about Mando, like when she finds out that he's actually a child of the Watch. I think she says like some sort of curse word under her breath or whatever the case may be, because she knows just how different of belief systems that these two certainly have. But listen, I love the camaraderie though that they all managed to find at the end, that they all, regardless of where their belief system is, they still come together to have that to get the mission done. And the mission is in fact to take down this Imperial freighter that Bo-Katan mentions has a ton of weapons on it that apparently the Empire wind up purchasing from all the valuables that they wind up getting from their purging of the Mandalorian when they occupied that particular planet. I'm assuming, if anything, they probably sold a ton of those items on Mandalorian in order to purchase these weapons. So Bo-Katan wants to get these weapons back for her people so they can go ahead and take over Mandalore once again. I hope that that's something that they focus on in this show at some particular point in time. Like for me, I find it hard to bring Katee Sackhoff back for one episode and that's it. I don't know if we will see her again, but maybe in like a season 3 or a season 4. Like I honestly wouldn't mind a battle for Mandalore. I think that would be pretty cool to kind of see things kind of come full circle. But I will say this, considering how much we've seen Katee Sackhoff and the rest of her crew sort of unmasking themselves, I am wondering if this is going to allow Din going forward to eventually relax on his vows, if you will. And not to say that he won't be a true Mandalore, but at least be more open-minded to the idea that you can still be or still represent the Mandalorian ways even if you're not necessarily wearing your helmet. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that this opens up Din's eyes a little bit, and maybe by the end of the season, we see him unmasking himself, or at least getting more comfortable with taking the mask off. Who knows? But at least the idea that that thought process is out there now, that the Mandalorian has something to think about. I will be interested to see where that certainly goes going forward, especially considering the fact that I think when we watched the Mandalorian season 1, a lot of people question the idea of why isn't Mando taking off his helmet, right? Like we've seen previous Mandalorians from from Rebels, from Clone Wars, all unmasking themselves, and it was clearly not that big of a deal. So I'm glad that this episode really answers that. The idea that while Din is not Mandalore, the fact that he was raised by Mandalorians, we have to understand he was definitely raised by the religious zealot aspect of that Mandalorian race that kind of separated itself from everybody else. So there definitely will be distinctions and certain beliefs and aspects that are different from everybody else. So I'm glad that they at least focused that and brought that to our attention here in this week's episode. But man, I enjoyed it, man. I really enjoyed it. Seeing the working together of Mando along with Bo-Katan. I think all the cameos did a fantastic job in here. Also, bring back me some more Katee Sackhoff, please. I'm definitely looking forward to that for sure. Who's here today? Nerd YouTube. What's up, Nerd? I appreciate it, man. Heyo, good to see you. Thank you very much for stopping by. We were actually just about to wrap up this week's episode, but hey, feel free to certainly join us. We do a live episode of A+ Hero Report every Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Time, but every Friday, usually around 6 or 7 o'clock, we go live with our Mandalorian reviews, just in case you were wondering for the future, Nerd. But other than that, guys, yeah, I think everybody did a fantastic job. Congrats to Bryce Dallas Howard for actually doing better, if you ask me, improving upon her second appearance here. Again, Katee Sackhoff nailing that role of Bo-Katan. If anybody knows that character, it's her, considering the fact that she voiced that character in the Clone Wars. Moff Gideon still giving me goosebumps and making me nervous anytime I see him on screen. And of course, learning more about Mandalorian, you can't go wrong. You honestly can't go wrong. But hey, appreciate that, Nerd. Thank you very much for the compliments. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to go ahead and do it for us. And listen, in the future, if you guys are in fact interested, if you have any live viewer questions, whether that be for The Mandalorian or whether that be for our Sunday's episode of A+ Hero Report, feel free to go ahead and submit them over anytime at aplusopinions@gmail.com. Again, that's aplusopinions@gmail.com. If you want to ask me a question about The Mandalorian going forward, feel free to go ahead and get that in before 6 o'clock Friday Central Time. I'll go ahead and answer that. And if I miss it, I'll definitely go ahead and highlight it on Sunday's episode of A+ Hero Report. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us here today. So thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'll see you guys soon. And in the meantime, do me a big favor. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. May the Force be with you, and keep it A+. Bye.